When I first got into this series, it was a seemingly endless stream of love and enjoyment. I was head over heels for just about everything it was doing, but then I got to Tales of Grace's F, the 12th mothership title in the series. When I first finished the game, my reaction was along the lines of, I distinctly remember when I took a shower that night and just stood there like, what did I just play? What did I think of that game? Why is the hot water not working? This game, my goodness, this game. I have so many thoughts on it and can't decide for the life of me whether I like it or not. Thought I had finally come to a conclusion in my top 10 Tales games, but let's just say that's gonna get a whole do-over when this retrospective finally concludes. Now that I've played it once more for the sake of footage in the review, as well as I've been streaming it in awful laptop quality on the hardest difficulty for my suffering and your enjoyment, may or may not have popped it in once or twice off the records. I've played this game more than any other Tales game besides Vesperia. Why would I do this? Because I want to understand it. I want to be able to say I know exactly what this game is trying to do. And more importantly, I don't want anyone saying I'm playing the game wrong, because at this point, I think I've got this game's number down. If I still don't understand this game, I don't think that's an issue on my end. At least give me that. We've got a big topic for today, so let's finally dive into Tales of Grace's F, the game that leaves me so emotionally confused. Let's do it. Wow, getting heated already? Nah, it's just before we start this off properly, I believe some background is necessary on this game's existence, as that directly correlates with how I'll be handling situations like this in the series going forward. So, Tales of Grace's F. What's with the extra letter at the end? Well, if you didn't already know, Tales of Grace's F is an enhanced port for Tales of Graces, originally released on the Wii of all things. Yep, the system had 2 Tales games available on it, or 3 if you count Symphonia, but only if you lived in Japan, because Graces was Japan exclusive. A Japan exclusive Tales game? What, are you gonna tell me the sky's blue too? Thankfully, it was brought over everywhere else on the PS3 with some cleaned-up graphics and a whole bunch of added content, most prominently a 10-hour epilogue titled Lineage and Legacies. We fans refer to it as the Future Arc, or F-Arc. Fark? No? Okay, sorry. This brings the base game's 2 arcs, the childhood arc and main arc, up to 3, and adds a lot more to the game both story and gameplay wise, making for the best way to play Graces by a landslide. From this point onward in the retrospective, if a Tales game gets a remake that changes up how it's played entirely, I'll be sure to talk about both versions. For example, when I talk about Tales of Destiny, I'll be discussing the original in detail, as well as the PS2 remake, both in the same video. Because Tales of Graces and Tales of Grace's F are essentially the same game, just one is in my native language simply with more content, not to mention objectively looks better, I'm only going to talk about that iteration because it makes the most sense to me. Hence why this is a revolutionary review on Tales of Grace's F. Now that we've cleared that up, let's not waste any more time and jump right into the review, starting, of course, with the presentation. When I first played the game, I was not impressed with it visually. I don't think I was being too harsh on it either, because I had just come off of Symphonia HD, which was a remaster of a GameCube game, or I guess more specifically a PS2 game, and I thought it looked fine. Unfortunately, I still don't dig the way the game looks. The fact that this is an upscale of a Wii game shows. Character models are so underwhelming. They can be a little expressive when needed, but never to the level of any other Tales game, including the other one released on the Wii. And look at how disproportionately big their heads are. It almost seems like an awkward middle ground between shoujo and chibi art styles, because everyone is short and stout, but not quite at the same time. It's so weird, and I'm not a fan. But the actual designs themselves, I mean, whew! Bamco did not need to go off as hard as they did with these, because many of them just so happen to be among my favorite character designs in the series. Sophie's F-Arc outfit, Richard showing that Goth is still in, Asbel's jacket, and Sharia. Man, oh man, I'm head over heels for her design. That's it though, just her design. The game's art style as a whole is pretty clean, as despite me not being fond of how the world looks in-game and technically speaking, this is a very aesthetically pleasing game. In my opinion, the most aesthetically pleasing Tales game. Seeing the planet surrounded by a giant ring is so damn cool and creative. Many side characters and villains also sport dope designs. The menus are calming and easy on the eyes, and that title screen freaking chills, man. The haunting deep piano and watercolor look as Asbel and Sophie gaze into the distance. Oh, I love it. The game's aesthetics were a big factor that drove me into playing this as early as I did in my Tales journey. Going back to the presentation's technical aspects, the way the game animates said characters is decent, I suppose. It's got that good old stiff Tales cutscenes movement we hate to love, but on top of that, has some pre-rendered scenes that animate much better than before, like in Exilia. Characters also animate incredibly well in battle with all the art animations and movements. Alongside them, spells appear so over the top this time around, and I've kind of grown to like it. And shoutouts to this game for having the smoothest frame rate up until Berseria anyway. While the overworld and cutscenes are locked at 30, the battle system's at a silky smooth 60 FPS, and it rarely dipped over my many play sessions. Very impressive, and I can only imagine it running smoother on even more powerful hardware than the PS3. And of course, we've got anime cutscenes that, to no one's surprise, look amazing. These always are and always will be a treat. In terms of the game's audio, I mean, it's aight. Starting with the soundtrack, I honestly find it pretty underrated. Every battle theme, most of the field themes, boss battles, towns, even dungeons, there's a lot of pretty good stuff here. I'd call it pretty good, all things considered. What I wouldn't call pretty good is the voice acting. Now, I don't mean to disrespect anyone, all these voices are backed by talented people. Heck, some of them are among my favorite voice actors, but at the same time, I do have the right to critique them. Whether it was bad voice direction or whatever, I wasn't feeling a lot of the performances in this game. There were rarely any moments where characters gave out the needed emotion to carry scenes, and it's like everyone sounded bored for most of the game. When it came to humor, they were on point, but for more serious scenes, which are a majority of the game, I wasn't feeling it. So a bit of a mixed bag already. The soundtrack's cool, visuals are meh on a technical stance, art style and direction are on point, anime is always a win, and the voice acting is rough, which is quite unusual for the series. About half and half in terms of what's good and bad when taking how important these aspects are into consideration. And let that be the perfect, most accidental sign of things to come. Well, here we are. So, what's with the story of Graces? Well, for one, like I said near the beginning, the game is split up into 3 different arcs: the childhood arc, main arc, and F arc, or in simpler terms, the prologue, actual story, and epilogue. Let's start from the top, shall we? Our story begins following the protagonist Asbel and his brother Hubert exploring Lant Hill, an area near their town, Lant. At the top of the hill, the two find a strange girl who, stop me if you've heard this before, has lost her memory. Stop. They decide to name her Sophie and proceed to spend the rest of the prologue messing around, trying to find out if anyone knows her with their pal Sharia, befriending the prince of a nearby kingdom named Richard, dealing with the worst dad in gaming history, and getting their butts kicked at the end. The prologue concludes with a shockingly somber note. As Sophie dies protecting her newfound friends from the monster who almost killed them, Hubert is given away to another family because his dad sucks, and Asbel runs away from it all to become a knight, leaving Sharia all by herself. Richard just kinda dips in the middle of all this, I guess. Did somebody say emotional whiplash? If anything, this is a cool idea, showing us the lives of a good chunk of the main characters before the real plot progresses. It's not often we get their backstory right from the get-go, and it could help found a better connection between the player and the characters. I mean, that's one of, if not the most important aspect of this series, right? Tales is its characters. Simple as that. Showing more sides of the characters should only be a good idea, but there are 2 major issues with this arc that send the whole thing tumbling down. One, it's long and boring. So I guess that's 2 in 1 thing. Notice how quickly I summed up the childhood arc? Well, this crap takes about 3 hours to finish, which I guess isn't too long for JRPG standards, but it felt like an eternity because it was so damn boring. Barely anything happens until the very end, which would be okay, but problem number 2, these characters suck. Asbel is the brave one, Hubert is the cowardly sidekick, Sophie has amnesia, Sharia has a crush on the protagonist, and Richard's emo. Bam, I just summed up all the characters. This isn't an exaggeration either, there's nothing to these guys as kids. So, because the whole prologue is mainly here to develop the characters while setting the story up at the very end, it feels underwhelming. I don't care about these guys right now, and as a result, don't care about the childhood arc. This prologue was a little worrying, but the tale was just getting started. Not to mention I had heard this was the weakest part of the game anyway, so I was ready to dive into the real meat of the adventure. 7 years later. That's right, baby, Tales did time skips before it was cool, Fire Emblem. Oh. We catch up with Asbel, who's now technically an adult on a mission with his captain Malik, the man who speaks with his back. After running into a weird creature who seemingly destroyed a whole town, they run into Sharia, who informs him that his dad is dead! Instead of celebrating, for some reason, he returns to Lant to take over the position of Lord. Sophie comes back out of nowhere, and while part of the gang is together again, things aren't the same. Sharia is now cold towards Asbel as a direct result to him leaving her behind, and Sophie not only still can't remember her past, but also forgot about Asbel, Sharia, and the other 2. Even still, Asbel tries his best to protect his home as they're locked in battle with the nearby nation Fendel. Unfortunately, Asbel's plan to surprise attack Fendel backfires because Fendel attacks Lant during their surprise attack. Oops. Thankfully, Lant is saved by Hubert, now a certified badass, but also a jerk because he immediately calls out Asbel for being a bad leader, kicks his butt, then forces him to leave Lant. I mean, it's sort of reasonable and all because his family, oh, you know, abandoned him or whatever. Thanks for that, by the way. Now all alone, only with Sophie to keep him company, he's crushed by his inability to protect any of his friends and succeed at anything. The two soon run into some knights from Verona, Richard's kingdom, who are after Asbel for some reason. They head to Verona to see what's up, hear that Richard is dead, but soon after find him in a secret passage they explored as kids. Alright. When the game says someone's dead, just assume they aren't from here on out. Except for Asbel's dad. We don't need him. Asbel and Sophie are then caught up on what's been going on in the kingdom. Richard's uncle has killed his father and taken over the throne. Richard barely escaped with his life, being that a big portion of the kingdom turned against him, but is planning an uprising to take back the throne. Asbel and Sophie jump to the opportunity of helping their friend, and our first major goal is finally set. I don't like this story, it's no secret. I think it's very dumb, and let me explain why. For one, the game takes a little too long in deciding what its first actual goal is. For almost as long as the childhood arc itself, you still don't have something you're working towards, making for some weird pacing for a while there. When you finally get to Richard and the proper Act 1 of the game begins, it's some interesting stuff. In my opinion, the most interesting this story gets, minus the epilogue, but I wouldn't call that a compliment. After all, this is, if you ask me, the longest Tales game by far. I'm not kidding, this thing goes on forever. While I'd say the average length of a Tales game is 40 hours, this one took me around 60 my first time through. Side quests kept at the bare minimum, mind you. I don't mind a long game or anything, I do play JRPGs the most after all, but there are so many parts of the story that were unnecessarily long or simply didn't need to happen. Like when you finally get your airship but it needs some heat signals or whatever and you've got to go through a whole dungeon just for it. Said ship breaks and now you've got to go through another dungeon just to fix it. Both times, might I add, happened when the main villain is just going along with their plan. Sure, he gets kidnapped out of nowhere because they couldn't address her and Asbel's conflict in some other way that doesn't detract from the story. You try to warn Pascal's sister on an experiment and she just ignores you, making for another pointless dungeon. So many moments like these happen that feel like time wasters instead of character development or world building. Then there are just too many cliches for my taste. Part of why I love these games are how they take cliche concepts and bend them in interesting ways. This game is so by the numbers in terms of character tropes and story beats, my goodness. Everything that's set up in the game will happen exactly as you think it will, which was pretty annoying because I expect more out of a Tales narrative. There are some people that tell me it's just trying a fun adventure, not something to take so seriously. Then why does the game itself try to take everything it does so seriously? The tonal inconsistency is another thing that bothers me to no end. Are you trying to be lighthearted or serious? You can't have both in this case because it goes way too far in one direction or another. It's not even something I can laugh at. Most of the time anyway, because due to how long the game is, I just get tired of it. The game tries to have its cake and eat it too, making for a narrative I just roll my eyes at. Then it goes so far as to act like there are these incredibly high stakes with equally as high consequences, but takes the cliche, easy, Deus Ex Machina way out every time that it becomes borderline insulting. The game treats its audience like a bunch of kids or something, acting like all it's doing is so surprising and unexpected, as well as the most powerful message ever. No, it's campy and cheesy, which I would be okay with, just stop trying to take yourself so seriously. It's not working. I don't mean to take anything away from you all if you enjoyed the game story or the more serious moments hit hard for you, but they didn't do it for me, and the back and forth tone just made it even worse. All of this is thanks to the brilliant, never before done theme of friendship. Graces is the discovering strength to protect RPG, so it's all about the power of your friends and having the will to protect those you love. There is no twist to this theme, it's played completely straight and is meant to be taken seriously. Give me a break, dude. Is this game written for kids or Tales fans, whose most recent console release, might I remind you, featured a narrative about a corrupt empire and a main character who would murder in cold blood to do what he thought was just? The theme Graces is trying to convey doesn't fit with the series, and while I'd enjoy something like this on its own as a Tales game, it's ridiculous and not what I come to this series for. Is it unfair to judge the game like this? I don't think so. It is a mothership title in the Tales series, is it not? And even being a Wii game or whatever, let's not forget about Dawn of the New World, which had some of the most mature elements we've seen from this series yet. That being said, it frustrates me because the game set itself up so that it could have taken a multitude of more interesting narrative beats. With the childhood arc and showing how different the relationships between characters have become over time, I thought that'd play a major role in the game's story and showing more sides to these characters. But there's a scene that just happens out of of nowhere and makes everyone happy again, so there goes that. Then I thought it'd be about a growing conflict with one of the party members, which would spin the theme of protecting your friends on its head, but nope, the game takes that interesting premise and throws it out for yet another cliche because we can't have consequences. The power of friendship saves all. Do you see what I'm getting at here? So the pacing's bad, the themes are rough, and it's totally inconsistent to the point where I can't take anything seriously. At the very least, can I say I enjoyed the cast? The answer is a surprising yes and no. I don't hate these characters. I want to get that out of the way right now. Well, I don't hate most of these characters anyway, because as a whole, they're okay. They interact well and have funny banter, but that's it. I can only enjoy these characters when I'm not taking the story as a whole seriously, or when it's through funny side quests and skits. When it comes to the main story and its serious moments, again, the majority of the game, I can't be bothered. Let's start off with Asbel, who is without a doubt my least favorite protagonist in the entire series. I guess he's a perfect representation of this game's story though, because he's literally a beta anime protagonist who does everything in the name of friendship, is oblivious to Sharia's obvious crush, and vows to be the strongest or whatever. And that's his entire character for the whole game. He doesn't change, he doesn't develop, he doesn't get stronger or improve, he just whines about wanting to be strong. So even if the point was that he already was strong or doesn't need that strength, he never learns that. The only time he does anything in the main campaign is in this scene and after the final freaking boss. He does such an awful job at conveying the game's themes of protecting your friends because he can't, physically or emotionally. Was this not realized? What's the point of making him the protagonist when he's a horrible leader? Matter of fact, the protagonist should have been Sophie, since she has the strength to protect in both aspects, and is a much more interesting character who actually grows over the course of the game. She genuinely gets focused. Heck, I'd say the story focuses too much on Sophie, which makes her the only character I can say I love out of this cast, but screws over everyone else. Pascal and Malik are just there with barely anything to do. Richard's boring. Hubert's okay, I guess, but gets backseated so hard that he's unable to be interesting. And then there's Sharia, without a doubt my least favorite character in the whole game. She has a crush on Asbel, acts cold to him for a bit, then gets a crush on him again. That's her whole character arc. Spoilers, oops. Other than that, she's like a mom to Sophie and wants Pascal to take a bath, and all the guys think she's hot or whatever. Then we got dumb villains who are on screen for like 1 second, and the only good one is the main antagonist, but because they're interesting, another character has no character. Oops. Look, I'm sorry, okay? It's just so stupid with this dumb plotline that can't decide on its tone and all these needless parts that drag me as a cast can't keep me interested. And you know what the worst part of all this is? The F arc literally fixes everything. The themes, pacing, characters that are actually interesting and can hold up a decent conversation. Where was this? Asbel actually gets stuff done, the story changes the theme entirely to be one more in line with what I expect from the series. Sharia still sucks, but Richard has a personality and Pascal, Malik, and Hubert feel like worthy party member slots. I'm enjoying myself, crazy! But I gotta get through all this mediocrity just to play it. I mean, technically no, since once you beat the game, you can select it from the main menu and keep playing it, so I never have to subject myself to the ridiculousness that is its main arc. But still, man, I wish the whole game was like this. It really is that much better. Not to mention the ending is a million times better than the one in the main arc. If we only got the Wii version and that was how Graces was canonically finished, oh my goodness. But those are my thoughts. Childhood arc was lame, main arc was even lamer, and I couldn't care less about the cast unless they were doing some comedy act or whatever. That being said, I was a huge fan of the F arc, having much more competent themes, the characters are way better written, and it was a much more satisfying story to follow, making me all the more frustrated that the game wasn't as well written for the majority of the way through, because keep in mind, the F arc is only an added 10 hours to the regular 60-hour campaign. I know they could have done better here, partly because they do in the same game, but man, this story does not do it for me. We're done here, and now it's time to move on to the battle system. Things can only get better, right? Welcome to the Style Shift Linear Motion Battle System. And no, I would never get used to each game's ridiculously long battle system names, no matter how far in this retrospective I get. And you know, I think we can agree to an extent on the story, if anything. I don't think this game's biggest selling point is its narrative, because all the compliments I hear about this game mainly stem from the battle system. So many people will tell you that it's the best one in the entire franchise. Heck, I would have told you that for a while, and my opinion only recently changed to Vesperia, but that doesn't detract from this game at all. If anything, in this most recent playthrough, I was super excited to dive into combat and understand it even more, and I got some very interesting results. Now, before I get into all of that, some explaining needs to be done, because as you can tell by the footage, the combat is very different than any Tales game before it. This is because at this point in the series, the Tales games were being developed by two different factions, Team Symphonia and Team Destiny, aka the one who made the games you probably played, and the one who made all the Japan exclusives. This game, unlike Vesperia, which was the most recent console entry at this point in time, was made by Team Destiny, who had not only primarily made their games in 2D, but designed their games games way different than Team Symphonia. For example, the big thing a lot of their battle systems were known for was using AC and CC. Yup, they're the ones responsible for that, and Graces being the first game they developed making it outside of Japan introduced a lot of people to the concept. But CC is just the tip of the iceberg in Graces combat. So you move up and down instead of left and right, free running is still an option for full 3D movement, you can backstep, sidestep, dash forward step, and of course block. No magic guard though, a normal block guards against spells now, which is weird, not to mention inconsistent, but oh well. When it comes to attacking, you no longer have normal attacks, but A arts and B arts. The beginning of the art trees, ladies and gentlemen. A arts are your normal attacks more or less, and B arts are basically the arts of past games, be it more involved attacks or full-on spells. Your A arts make up the arts tree, which is this big old thing. Your attack will change depending on how many times you use an A art, which direction you're holding, and how much CC you have. To explain a bit better, your first A art with Asbel is a regular sword hit that costs 1 CC. Now let's say I'm not holding any direction, right? Then my next A art would be this attack and cost 2 CC. The following would cost 3 and the final would cost 4. Now if I were to do another combo, this time holding right, my second attack would still cost 2 CC but be entirely different. There are 4 different combo branches for most characters, one for no direction, left, right, and forward or backwards, and when you start a combo you aren't limited to whatever direction you started holding. My first attack is the same no matter what, my second could be a left hit, my third could be a right, so on and so forth. Not to mention, if you still have CC to spare, you can keep attacking with your combo resetting to the first attack, making for a lot of on-the-spot alterations of attacks. Was that a lot? Well, I tried to explain it the best I could, but all in all, it's pretty cool. I don't know why lately I've been so cynical towards art trees in my Arise trailer analyses and whatnot, but there's nothing wrong with them here anyway. They're kinda cool. They're more or less just attacks, only a lot flashier and can be combined with dashing. And due to this game featuring a style shift combat system, A arts also act as one of the different fighting styles for characters. B arts not only are set up to be like how arts were in past Tales games, but also attack in different methods. It sounds a lot more complicated than it is. Basically, the fighters will have their slower, stronger attacks as B arts, and spellcasters will cast their spells with them. But the concept itself is pretty cool. Not to mention, it's due to that, every single character is so fun to play as. Controlling every character is an absolute blast, not only because of their fighting styles, but the game speed makes everyone move at a good pace. Not to mention, dodging is incredibly responsive. Speaking of dodging, the game puts a heavy emphasis on that by rewarding last-minute evasions with more CC and the ability to punish. It's also key to filling up the Elith gauge, this game's iteration of Overlimit. Once it's full, which happens gradually over time and the most when you dodge last second, an Elith burst will occur where you can chain as many attacks as you want with infinite CC for a limited time and can unleash the oh so satisfying Mystic Art. Every character has at least 3 this time around, and 9 times out of 10 they're awesome. This game probably has my favorite selection of these due to how hype and over the top they are. It directly correlates with the combat's pure energy. Then there's the game's defining feature on top of changing up combat entirely. Strangely introduced in the F arc, which is the end of the game? But whatever, it's Excel mode. When your gauge is at least filled halfway, you get a special perk that's different per character and really cool. Asbel gets a floating ball of energy around him, Sophie can warp up to enemies, Sharia freezes time, so on and so forth. Not to mention you get another Mystic Art on top of your regular 3, hell yeah! It's so cool and I only wish it was introduced earlier because it adds a lot to combat. You can bring it over to the main arc's post game once you beat the F arc, which I thought was a neat touch. You can get access to this and all these specials through skills, which are also how you unlock more attacks and combat options. How do you get skills in this game? Through titles. Yeah, you know these, right? In other Tales games, even though they don't really have them anymore, they were little things you'd get over the story and side quests that act as, well, a title for the character in question. In older Tales games, they'd buff certain stats, but they became purely cosmetic in future ones, with some giving you a costume, so even more cosmetic. That was an accident. Here they're how you get new skills, as there are a boatload of titles per character, each having 5 unlockable skills that you gain by earning SP after every battle. Once you learn all 5, you can keep the title equipped to master the skills attached to that title, and when you have the title equipped, the skills effects will be doubled. This makes for a lot of customization, as you can equip and de-equip as you please depending on what you want to learn and in what order you want to go about it, because even though it starts off fairly limited, you'll be getting titles left and right, allowing for different methods of growth over the course of the game separate from level ups. In fact, I'd argue level ups are next to useless in this game. Sure, your stats get a bit of an increase, but there are plenty of skills that can up your stats at a more drastic rate, as well as give other perks. I feel like the game knows this too, because there's no fanfare when a character levels up. It just tells you on top of the tiny character portrait as if it were an afterthought. I don't know, I thought it was funny. And to top off the customization brought to the table with skills, weapons can now be dualized, which is more or less synthesis with a twist. You know how in Vesperia you can synthesize a weapon's plus iteration, and have a new skill or two and be more powerful, making for a better version of the weapon? Well, the same idea is brought here, as you can synthesize these collectible gems and make a weapon have a plus iteration, and a plus 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 99. Keep in mind this applies to every weapon and every piece of armor. It's a cool addition and borderline necessary on higher difficulties, as well as gives an alternative to just buying the next weapon with higher numbers, even if you'll still be doing that most likely. Yeah, the game's got a lot going on, but it's pretty cool all things considered. The game is fast, frantic, customizable, rewards attack recognition, and is hard as hell. For this playthrough I did most of it on Evil with some New Game Plus benefits, and it was kicking my butt. However, I didn't mind all that much because it felt like my skill was being rewarded. The timing for perfect dodges was incredibly strict, but so satisfying to pull off. Stringing together combos and playing the game feels satisfying. It's a very fun combat system to learn and attempt to master. I say attempt because sooner or later we get to the bosses and suddenly it all comes crashing down. See, playing Graces puts you on a high, and as soon as one negative trips you, all the others crowd around you and kick you while you're down. Graces is fun, but boy is it jank. So first off, there's this thing called an Iron Stance, which let's just refer it by its proper name, bullshit. It's basically super armor, right? Only it seems to activate whenever it feels like, both for you and bosses. You supposedly get it as Asbel when you whip out the sword for B arts, and it's only active for a couple of seconds. Okay, how do you get it as anyone else? And how does it work for bosses? Because even mid-combo, they seem to just pull it out their butts, unfairly breaking out of my attacks, and I have no way to counter because it's super armor. Next, why the heck is Recover one of the skills you learn? It's just as baffling as Backstep being one, but it bothers me more so here because it's in some random title you have to go out of your way to find. I went my whole first playthrough without Recover, and it was miserable, partly because being in the air in any way, shape, or form is a huge disadvantage. Other than recovering, you have no aerial options, which is a shame because it could have made for some cool combat options, but in this game you can't even so much as jump. A missed opportunity and kryptonite if an enemy can throw you like a ragdoll. Speaking of a strange omission, why is there no magic guard? Guarding blocks spells only half the time, and if it does break your guard, my gosh, it does so much damage. Look at this, it nearly one-shot me. That's fair. Shoutouts to when you do the optional duels and your opponents can use spells, you will lose your patience because it feels like there's no way to stop an enemy from casting a spell. And if you don't dodge it, you better hope your guard will decide to work. Moving right along, I don't like Elephant Burst at all. They activate as soon as it's full, so you have no control over it, taking away a lot of potential strategies. And enemies fill this up so quickly, it's straight up unfair. From what the game taught me, it'll fill at a snail's pace unless I'm dodging attacks, but enemies can fill it up like it's nothing. And when they get it, they all have super armor, which is miserable. Also, why are all boss mystic arts screen nukes or one-hit kills? Love that. Why can't I just decide when I want to use Overlimit? Nobody complained about it and it was in my control. This is the worst iteration of Overlimit in the series if you ask me. And finally, I absolutely despise everything regarding items. What happened here? When you used an item in the past, it was quick, easy, would have a timer so you couldn't spam, at the start anyway, and gave invincibility frames to be fair. It was great. Here, when you use an item, you just stand there like an idiot for 3 seconds, the timer takes an eternity, and you don't have any invincibility frames or a guard of some kind. Using an item is like painting a target on you, which is dumb. Why are there skills that negate this? This is how it should be from the start of the game. It's an item! It's extra frustrating because you'll be the only one using these unless you give direct commands. There's no auto item toggle and they won't even request to use them. And no, there's no option in the strategy menu to change that. Heck, there are no options at all in the strategy menu. What is this? There's nothing of use to toggle. Maybe I can just rely on my party members? Nope. This game has the worst AI in the series. It's no contest. Shiria doesn't heal, Asbel can't understand when he's in a losing fight, Pascal spellcasts right in front of the enemy like an idiot, and nobody can dodge in a game all about dodging! Seriously, why make a battle system all about last-minute reactions and evasion and not have the CPUs react or evade? Especially on higher difficulties and normal, oh my gosh, my team was awful. And this series combat is almost completely about team synergy no matter what. Am I expected to solo all these enemies that can easily gangbang me? Or these bosses that can randomly have super armor and kill in just a handful of hits even on normal with ridiculous amounts of HP? Oh, there I go getting heated again. That's just what this combat does to me. I'll be having so much fun, and as soon as one thing goes wrong, it all comes tumbling down. It's why I don't call it my favorite combat system. Definitely top 5, but that's as far as I could go. Not enough is left up to skill, but to chance, and it makes the game very frustrating to come back to on higher difficulties and too much of a hassle to master all things considered. Not to mention, it's a little overwhelming overwhelming with the titles and skills. There's just too much here, and it's all thrown at me at once. I don't know, there are too many things holding this combat back, but it is a lot of fun in the end. That feeling of laying it into enemies with these over-the-top attacks and crazy spells, dashing at the last possible second, using crazy skills to whip out mystic arts left and right. I have so much fun when all the cards line up, too much fun. Because of that, I can't bring myself to dislike it. I actually love it, as much as it frustrates me. Even though it's not the mastercraft I once considered it, that's okay. I'm still having fun most of the time, that it almost makes me forget about all the frustration it just caused me. I'll probably just stick with hard mode at most though from here on out. Oh, the home stretch. So for this game, the world map has been killed and it's the beginning of map segments between towns and dungeons. Honestly, these don't bother me because the layouts are way more interesting than the highways that would eventually plague the Exilia games, and it felt like a world you were traveling in anyway. They're very dense and don't take me out the experience at all. I like them. Same for the towns that were full of people, all a decent size, and stick out from one another. Then there are the dungeons, which I find pretty interesting. There are a bunch that were fun to travel through, be it with puzzles or neat designs, but there are also a handful of annoying ones, like the gigantic maze wall bridge, the mind-numbingly boring ruins right below it, and the awful final dungeon. Good lord. Long, boring, long, tedious, long, and I don't just mean the main arc, but the final dungeon and the F arc is pretty rough too. But you know what? I'm glad there was a good amount of effort put into these, and the puzzles don't even rely on a sorcerer's ring. I like them for the most part too. Also, I like that there was a bit of an emphasis put on exploring with the discovery book. You document landmarks and have a fun skit surrounding them, encouraging you to keep an eye out and look around every now and then, which I appreciated. Side quests were incredibly abundant and fun to do. Only some though, because most of them were fetch quests you get from the inn's request menus. Collect this item, talk to that person, a lot of that, but there were some that added backstory and mixed things up. It helps that the game keeps track of most of them, though some slip through the cracks and you will still need a guide to 100% the game like the rest of the series. This was a step in the right direction though. What was a step in the wrong direction though was the DLC. This game has unlockable costumes, but only like a handful. That being said, this game has the most costumes out of any Tales game, but you have to buy them for a combined price more expensive than the game itself. That sucks, dude, because these are always a reward and a fun way to spice up new playthroughs. Now I can get like 2 or 3 per character for free, and you can't even bring them over to a new game plus. Not sure what's up with that. I did a lot of side quests while gathering footage, and when I did, I had an epiphany. The card game that featured Asbel, Pascal, and this guy voicing past Tales characters in a mini trivia game, the fun scenes like the play, a really good EX dungeon, a whole optional dungeon that I never even knew about for an in request, getting all the mystic arts for characters. There's a lot of love poured into this game, and that's what keeps pulling me back. Despite how terrible some design choices are, how dumb that plot is, and how much I can't bring myself to care about this cast, I keep falling for how much effort and ambition was put into this game, how many risks it takes and changes it brings that it believes with all its heart benefits the series. I hate so much about this game, but I love just as much about it. I have the biggest love-hate relationship with Tales of Grace's F, only heightened by how solid the F portion of it is, and it explains why I've been so back and forth with the title. I can't pick one feeling toward the game because it's both. It's always been both, and it makes sense that my final thoughts on the game are as weird as the game itself. Oh, Graces, you're such a pain, making me love and hate you the way you do. I want to emphasize more than anything that anyone getting into the series needs to play this game. It's such a risk taker and so weird in just about every way that it's understandable why people love it, hate it, or feel a little bit of both like myself. It's the kind of game you have to play for yourself, and I like that about it. I like a lot about it. The combat, when it goes your way, feels so good and the amount of character and love is astounding. This game has my favorite post game in all of Tales, and I enjoy popping it in just to mess around every now and then. Heck, I find myself discovering new things about it even still, much to my pleasure. The dungeons are interesting, it's the most aesthetically pleasing game in the series if you ask me. The soundtrack is a bop, and the F arc is such a great addition. At the same time, the game looks pretty rough at a technical standpoint. The majority of the story is my least favorite in the series. The cast is lame when they're trying to be serious. Combat can catch you off guard and frustrate you to no end, and the bosses are either meh or horrible with the occasional good one here or there. So many mechanics are sloppy and not thought out well enough, and the most fun I can have with this game is when it's on lower difficulties, allowing me to just cruise along without having to use any actual strategy, making me get the most out of it when it's a flashy yet shallow experience. I want to get more out of the game, but it feels like every time I try to take that extra step forward, the game pushes me back and shakes its head. That being said, the game's a mess. Tales of Grace's F is a mess. A beautiful, raw, frustrating, yet irresistible mess that I can't help but crawl back to over and over again. I love it, I hate that I love it, but that's just how this entry in my favorite video game franchise is for me, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you so much to my amazing bank dudes who go by the names of Alex520, Capone Ardelane, Choco, Cleric Eric, Comic Foil, Corbett, Flowergar, Forever Fizz 8, Gaius, Gentleman Gamer, Jacob Horner, James V, Katie, Kiara Loveday, Kimpy7, Ludom James 115, Logan, Mitchie, Mongo, Renegade Master, Rico Olive, Scott Appleman, Soul, Soracat, Steve Appleman, Tex-Mex, and Xenolith. You all are, without a doubt, the best people ever. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And I would like to thank you, the viewer. I hope you enjoy the rest of the retrospective as it continues, so be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed, follow me on Twitter for a more personal side and more engagement, drink plenty of water, love yourself too while you're at it, and I'll see you in whatever we do next. Bye-bye!